Good morning. I'm here to meet the vinyl community. I'm going to read part 3 of Summit at Paramount. So what it's called, Summit at Paramount. I'm trying to finish up the chapter today. Here we go. A few years before that, when Robert Evans, excuse me, I have a friend here and she's interrupted me. Yeah, go do what you need to do. A few years before that, when Robert Evans coaxed Polanski back to Los Angeles from self-imposed European exile to direct his masterpiece, Chinatown, Korshak's benefit hand stretched out to bless his religionist Polanski again. When Robert Evans hosted a star-studded Passover feast to celebrate Polanski's reunion at Paramount, generous Korshak quietly fitted the bill for his kosher catering. One of the few public mentions of the rarely quoted Korshak's thoughts on the Cielo Drive mystery emerged in February 1st, 2019 article in Deadline by Paramount executive Peter Bart. Bart recalls that Korshak phoned him right away after news of the killings broke. The danger is greatest when nothing makes sense, said Korshak, a man with plenty of experience on unsolved crimes and how to keep them unsolved. Bart politely identifies Korshak as a celebrity fixer, granting with amusing understatement that Korshak was a good man to know in difficult situations. Bart disagreeably avoided mention of the Polanski-Korshak summit Grotowski described. He does acknowledge that Evans, who took upon Korshak to his godfather, arranged for a security team to transport Polanski to the Paramount lot where he was sequestered in the bungalow recently vacated by Julie Andrews, which accords with Grotowski's recollection to me. I have no idea if Peter Bart might be privy to more information about Korshak's role in orchestrating the cover-up. The loaded question Bart posed in the title of his article can only be food for thought. At 50th anniversary of Manson's atrocities looms, should Bob Evans and I have had regrets for coaxing Roman Polanski into Hollywood? One of Korshak's superpowers was his ability to make sure that stories not meant to be told went proof when they were made their way into the nosy press. Grotowski told us that Korshak's indomitable influence on politicians, the district attorney's office, and the police, the journalist in his pocket, assured that the loose talk of drug dealings and orgies at Cielo Drive were eventually quelled. However, we have no idea what other dangerous data leaks Korshak nipped in the bud. The fixer's long-term friendship with California Governor Ronald Reagan, the obedient vassal of Korshak's client and partner in crime, Lou Wasserman of MCA, who just happened to have been my father Don McElwain's boss, would alone be able to move mountains. Back in the early 50s, Korshak and his actor buddy Ronnie were so close they used to paint the red town and hit the nightclubs in search of female companionship. One of those events, a rambling 42-year-old Ronnie got away with raping a 19-year-old actress named Celine Walters, who he'd set his eye on at the Slapsy Maxy nightclub, a notoriously mobbed-up pickup joint arranged by young Charlie Manson's hero, L.A. gangster in chief Mickey Cohen. Korshak had more than enough other dirt on Governor Reagan to guarantee his full cooperation. The purpose of the Paramount meeting was not merely conspiratorial. Korshak was confident that in the unlikely event the crime continually went to court and Polanski was dragged into the proceedings, he would discreetly oversee whatever legal machinations might be required through an intermediary. So invisible was Korshak's influence that he didn't even have a license to practice law in California. He guided associates to do the dirty work for him, while the attorneys he advised fronted in court. Korshak handled the behind-the-scenes maneuvers to make things go away his powerful clients required, including payoffs, gently implied euphemistic threats, and other less than legal forms of persuasion. Greg Bautzer, B-A-U-T-Z-E-R, was one of the prominent show business lawyer Gutowski recalled being mentioned by Korshak as a possible Polanski attorney if developments required. Said to be the only man who could get his longtime client, Uber recluse Howard Hughes, on the phone. Bautzer was instrumental in securing Robert Evans his job at Paramount. As closely ally of Korshak on many of crooked legal capers since the 1940s, his peripheral involvement in the cover-up is not surprising. Bautzer could have had other vested interests as well, as mentioned among the couples that he caught carnally cavorting in the films and videos confiscated by the police at Cielo Drive, were the legendary ladies man Bautzer and his girlfriend, the actress Jane Wyman, California Governor Ronald Reagan's former wife. Bautzer was every bit as much of a playboy as the younger men in the swinging Polanski circle, but definitely not in the love generation. Although a knockout drunk notorious for besotting brawling, like his colleague Korshak, he disapproved of drugs other than alcohol, so it is odd to find him in the far-out company said to be frolicking on film. Furthermore, Bautzer and his Wyman's tryst took place in the early 50s and was long over by 69. One wonders then if some have speculated if some of these missing fame porn films could only feature recent fornications, but including older material shot secretly for extortion and blackmail purposes. Black playmate Connie Kresge claimed that such incriminating material chased from crooked cops in Los Angeles and London and was also part of her beau Victor Lona's porn collection. Evans didn't call forth Korshak, Prince of Darkness, under the underworld from the infernal regions from his palatial home in 100624 Shalon Road in Bel Air, not far from the bloodbath of the previous day in nearby Benedict Canyon. To be invited to Chez Korshak was a signal honor, so coveted. Columnist Joyce Haber coined the now widely used phrase, the A-list, to refer exclusively to the lucky few Korshak favored. Even at the annual Christmas soirees the Korshaks held there for the Hollywood elites, guests were grieved at the door by the conspicuous armed guard and the accoutrement that spooked some of the celebs. The guy who replaced his famously whacked friend and client, Bugsy Siegel in Murder Incorporated's West Coast colonial governor, wasn't taking any chances. Along with the prestigious artwork on the walls and the fine wines in the cellars, Korshak's mansion also included a sealed room where absolutely confidential meetings could be held. Considering the background role Benjamin Siegel played in the decades of LA underworld activity from which the Tate LaBianca murders sprang, one of those typically Mansonian me synchronicities is that Siegel and Vincent Bugliosi both shared the same name. Both of them loathed the bug. An interesting parallel reflecting Manson's belief that words hit at hidden correspondences. Ever since reserved, self-spoken Korshak took over the East Coast mob's LA and Vegas concerns from the flamboyant loudmouth Bugsy in 1947, he kept a low profile as the anti-Siegel, flashy Bugsy who controlled the drugs, prostitution, loan sharking, and gambling rackets in Los Angeles, liked to get his mug in the papers for good-looking dames. Quite Korshak, who, though he also directly entertained a sting of beautiful mistresses, among them well-known actresses strictly forbade photographs of himself even at private events. Some powerful entertainers were banished from his realm for breaking this taboo. If Siegel dressed in garnished garb like a movie hood, Korshak was noted for his impeccably well dressed. Korshak countered Bugsy's belligerent vulgarity with gentlemanly courtesy. Even in the most challenging situations, he never raised his voice. He never had to. We don't know what methods Korshak applied when tasked with silencing unwelcome truths about the Cielo Drive massacre, but one of the many well-documented incidents from this past service with the Hollywood elite associated with Jay Sebring might give us a clue. Korshak's civil and urbane demeanor hid a cruelty he had more than capable of exercising when necessary. Back in the 50s, Columbia's mobbed-up studio chief, Harry Kahn, who was Trump's attorney, who was McCarthy's attorney in the McCarthy era, that's the same guy, Harry Kahn, was grooming a 23-year-old starlet, Kim Novak, to be the next Marilyn Monroe. When word got out about the archetypal blonde bombshell holding a necessarily furtive but passionate affair with Sebring's later friend and fellow coke fiend, Sammy Davis Jr., Kahn was outraged. Even the rumor of interracial sex would be career suicide in those days. At a party, Kahn was heard grumbling, "What's with that nigger? If he doesn't straighten up, he'll be minus another eye." Davis lost one eye in what's been described as a car accident, but what some maintain was an earlier warning act of mob violence. Davis, of his own lock, stock, and barrel at the Chicago mob, Korshak's employers, Kahn approached Sidney Korshak, Johnny Roselli, and Sam Giancana, held together by the biggest stake in Davis's earnings, to put an end to the potential scandal. When Davis failed to heed the friendly suggestion from an armed gunman who told him he'd be killed if he didn't break with Novak, Korshak utilized other means of persuasion. He visited Novak with compromising photographs David taken with a hidden camera in his bedroom. They showed the singer in El Flagrante Delicto with other famous white actresses. Novak tore the photos up. Korshak assured her that he had the negatives and that Davis would lose his other eye if their affair continued. Novak had no choice but to obey. Considering all the talk of explicit sex in the Tate Polanski circle, it's reasonable to wonder if a similar photographic pressure was applied to assure that the silence of stars who knew the score on Cielo, while several familiar with Korshak told me this tale. Other accounts have Korshak claiming it was enough to tell Davis that if he didn't comply, he'd never work again in the lucrative mob-controlled venture his career depended on. Sebring bragged that his own criminal mentors during his youth in Detroit were veterans of the Purple Gang, with whom Korshak had earlier links through his organization, Mo Dalitz, D-A-L-I-T-Z, another major power broker in Vegas. Although Korshak didn't approve of drugs, he knew that scores of the dangerous games Sebring played. During the first hippies had their first pull of pot, Korshak's brother Ted was heavily engaged in the narcotics traffic 30 years earlier. Considering Butowski's claim that Lones and Hefner of Playboy contributed to the cover-ups of Cielo, it's worth noting that the state of New Jersey denied Playboy Enterprises a casino license because of Korshak's involvement with Hefner's hunch. Hefner also hailed from Korshak's turf of Chicago. Lones and other Hef insiders suggested that the original Chicago Playboy Club was only allowed to operate with the cooperation of the local mob taking a cut. With the Korshak meeting at Paramount, the circumstances of the crime launched from the Western Town movie set were covered up by co-conspirators in the back lot of the movie studio. No wonder so many plots point to the most Hollywood of criminal mystery, smack of scripted melodrama. Butowski recalled but could not remember how exactly that mob-controlled Lou Wasserman, again my father's boss, the head of UCA, MCA Universal, was also involved in this effort, but he did not know why. As mentioned elsewhere, Wasserman was one of the most powerful moguls in the business, instrumental in the political rise of Ronald Reagan. With a little help from their mafia friends, Korshak and Wasserman had already been working together for decades by 69. The cover-up that had already been set in motion by the FBI to protect its informants and now complicated from some heavy players in the film industry's independent attempt to cloak the truth for their own purposes. Within days of the murders at Loose 2, subterfuge operations were well underway, intertwined with various mob interests owning strenuous and lethally successful efforts to prevent the career-damaging facts from coming out. The information Gutowski provided us with informs much of the fellows in this chapter. The lead he gave us continued to bear fruit for decades. It appeared at the time he spoke to us that he was no longer as close with Polanski as he had been. We were so surprised when in 2002 Gutowski returned to the movie industry by co-producing his old friend's film, The Pianist. My impression was that the anecdotes he told us were well-practiced tales he must have shared with many others, but save for a few telling hints here and there in the few on the record interviews Gutowski granted before and after the subject, after speaking on the record, he publicly struck for the most part in saying the usual socially acceptable things about the official narrative, covering story he witnessed being crafted in 1969. I later discovered on November 20, 69, article by columnist Sheila Graham entitled Polanski's Partner Says Law Knows Who Killed Sharon Tate. In light of what Gutowski revealed to us, this intriguing quote caught my eye. Mr. Gutowski told me he's convinced that the Los Angeles police knew who the murderer is, but through lack of evidence, cannot make an arrest. Through his sleuthing among the Polanski party people and his intelligence contacts, it is possible that Gutowski already knew those fuckers in Chatsworth were indeed behind the horrible haunting tout hip Hollywood. Sure enough, Charles Watson was arrested and charged with 7 counts of murder in his Texan home only 10 days after Gutowski's quote was published. Police officer Bob Helder stated that when he went to Paramount Studios bungalow where Polanski was sequestered, the enigmatic and omnipresent Reeve Whitson was there. Gutowski did not list him among the other prominent personages present, but then again, we must recall that Gutowski himself was trained in intelligence work. He surely had his reasons for letting some secrets go while evading others. As Whitson was working on the Sub Rosa private murder investigation with Colonel Paul Tate, who was openly hostile to Polanski, a bond between Whitson and Gutowski seemed unlikely. Confirming an important connection that I would soon learn, Susan Atkins, Ian Courier, and Vern Plumley also claimed Gutowski said that there were some prior connections between Jay Sebring and La Biancas. Although he said no longer recalled what it was, again, it was involving Sebring's Fairfax District hair salon. As of his writing, decisive evidence of that elusive missing link still remains a gap in our knowledge that would put many pieces in place. Although he was briefly forthcoming, he had no particular reason to trust us other than our mutual friendship with Ferdy Main. Gutowski spoke of these and other matters under the conditions that he would never reveal his identity until after his death. Out of gratitude for the information he provided, I kept the promise to him, even though many of the readers, among them some small old-timers who knew Gutowski, asked me to confirm their often accurate guesses concerning X's identity. After Gutowski died at the age of 90 in his native Poland in May of 1916, I revealed in several interviews that he was indeed the source I previously identified as X, as rightly suspected. The Korshak conspiracy was just one of the many self-protective attempts to withhold evidence in this yellow crime to law enforcement. Little did the nervous co-conspirators suspect in these early days that Vincent Bugliosi would soon be there to diligently make sure celebrity and mobster secrets stayed secret no matter what cost to truth, let alone justice. Augmenting that, Kutowski told us, I learned that the Genovese family, the successor of the Luciano Empire, which Sebring, the LaBiancas, and other in their network collaborated with, conducted its own investigation into the Tate LaBianca murders under the personal direction of Geraldo Jerry Catania, Catena, as the Genovese syndicate capo in '69. Catania was one of the main targets of the FBI sting plan that was underway when the publicity gave him the murder interfered with it. Catania was indicted in 1970 and sent to prison in 71 to 72. Charlie cultivated ties with Catania's Genovese family syndicate since the 50s when he befriended former boss Frank Costello in prison. Catania was also associated with the New Jersey gangster Afterlongi Zwillerman, who very likely arranged the murder of the former lover Jean Harlow's husband, Ben Byrne, in the Easton Drive home of Jay Sebring later lived in. That's another story from way early Hollywood. In our exploration of Manson the musician, Manson the mystic, and Manson the Hollywood party animal, we've already stretched a rough outline of what the crimes Manson the outlaw was convicted for really were and how peripheral the role he actually played, at least in one of his most identified with. Here we will focus on tracing in detail how some of the 150 people's fates steamed together into the chaotic series of events mislabeled as the Tate LaBianca murders. In the process, we must go far afield from Manson himself, who was simply one of the many players in the complicated drama. We will be obliged to find our way through the dense thicket of the history of organized crime in America and intricacies of drug distribution in California in the late 60s, the Polish exile community in America during the Cold War, and many other arcane domains not usually associated with the popular notions of the Manson story. As you are a partisan of the Helter-Skelter theory, that is the point where we must part ways completely. The crux of the matter isn't that the wrong people have been convicted of committing the murders, it's that the crimes were committed were altogether different than the ones they were tried for. And how is the process of covering up the truths, the machinery of the law in knowing and unknowing collusion with the underworld and entertainment industry and the clueless media, which totally failed in its task of accurate reporting, perpetrated its own crimes? That's the end of this chapter. We read enough about this both sides connections to organized crime yet for people to think this is a one-sided story? I think so. The next chapter is called You're So Vain You Probably Think This Murder Is About You. It's a short story. Maybe I'll play a little guitar and try to zap it on my phone, because nobody reads this stuff when I just go live, but they read it more when I record it myself. But this is the only way I can do these long chapters. So we'll pray for the vinyl community and all the members in the crime community, and we pray for peace among all the children. Have a wonderful day.